Hello, Dr. Michael Arnhem here again. This is part 2 on rights versus rights. And in the first part of this video, we were talking about the Ziegler case, in which there were actually 8, but the case involved only 4 protesters, demonstrators, who blocked the highway route to the ECHR Centre in East London because they were protesting against the arms trade, which they opposed. And the question is, under the 1980 Act, that is not allowed unless they had lawful authority or excuse. Did they have lawful authority? No. Lawful excuse? Yes, they claimed they had lawful excuse under Article 10 of the European Convention on Human Rights. And what does that say? Everyone has the right to freedom of expression. It then goes into detail on what that means. But the second part of this article contains some exceptions. This is quite common in the European Convention of Human Rights. Most of the articles do have something like this. In Article 10(2), the exercise of these freedoms may be subject to such formalities, conditions, restrictions, or penalties as are prescribed by law and are necessary in a democratic society in the interests of national security, territorial integrity, or public safety, for the prevention of disorder or crime, for the protection of health or morals, for the protection of the reputation or rights of others, for preventing the disclosure of information received in confidence, or for maintaining the authority and impartiality of the judiciary. Now those are quite numerous, those exceptions, and they're all very important. Particularly, I would say, the words necessary in a democratic society. So they can be, this right, the right of freedom of speech, can be limited if it is necessary to do so in a democratic society and in the interests of a number of things, including the rights of others. So you've got to do a balancing act between the rights of the protesters, in this case, and the rights of others. And that means, in this particular instance, the rights of those people wanting to attend the conference, the fair, or, of course, simply the public wanting to use the highway, because that is something that you have a right to do as well. So it could be that right, which is not specified in the European Convention on Human Rights, but that doesn't mean you haven't got that right. There are many, many rights you have which are not actually laid down by law. Like, for example, do you have the right to spit in the street? Well, normally yes, unless there's some particular rule or law which prohibits it. Some places there is such a rule, there is such a law. And the time when tuberculosis was very frequent and could be spread by spitting, there were local authority laws, bylaws, which prohibited spitting in the street. Nowadays, you don't see that so much. So you can spit in the street if you want to. But that's not a law, that's not a right which is in the European Convention on Human Rights. Not all the rights are there. So the right to use the highway is definitely a right. And in particular, I would say here, the right of those who wanted to attend the conference, and partly under Article 11, everyone has the right to freedom of peaceful assembly, and also those who wanted to attend the conference in order to speak at the conference. In other words, their freedom of speech. So, how is this going to be decided? Well, as I said, it was a yo-yo case. At first instance, which was in the Magistrates Court, because this was actually a criminal matter, the district judge there decided in favor of the demonstrators, of the protesters who lay down in the middle of the street, only one side of the street though, the side leading to the ECHR center, but blocking access to the fair, to the exhibition. And this district judge based his decision on these factors. The fact that the protest, as he said, was limited, because it was only limited to one half of the street, was targeted for a particular reason, and peaceful. It was limited, targeted, and peaceful action, he said. Was not unreasonable. And on that basis, he found the demonstrators not guilty, because they were charged under the Highways Act 1980, as I mentioned before. The case then went to the Divisional Court of the High Court, where it was heard by two judges who completely disagreed with the decision of the magistrate. They felt that he had got it completely wrong, because these protests seriously infringed the rights of others. It then ended up in the UK Supreme Court, where the protesters won again, although only by a majority, 3 judges to 2. Where does the law stand, therefore? Where do you stand? What are your rights if you are a demonstrator or protester? And what are your rights if your rights are curtailed or interfered with by demonstrators or protesters? My own view is that the middle decision, that of the Divisional Court, was right. That lying down in the middle of a street and preventing people from exercising their ordinary right of access the right of the public to use the highway and the rights of those wanting to attend the conference, that those rights should outweigh the rights of a few. We're only talking about 4 protesters here. How can those 4 protesters' rights take priority over those of the public in general? I would also go further and say it's undemocratic to allow such a small group, any group really, but I think it's particularly noteworthy that we're only talking about a handful of people here who went out of their way to block the highway, not only by lying down in the street, but also by attaching themselves to lock boxes. They went to great lengths to make it as difficult as possible to remove them, and it took the police, as I said before, an hour and a half to do so. I don't think that's reasonable at all. Protest is one thing, standing with placards, handing out leaflets, advertising on the radio or television, fine. That is true exercise of freedom of speech. But when you interfere with other people's freedom of speech in this way, in a major way like this, and in a very, very deliberate way, I don't think that's democratic. Democracy is about different ideas competing for the public support, yes, but not forcing people to accept your view, which is really what was happening here. They were forcing people to go along with their view that the conference was wrong because they couldn't attend the conference. They stopped people physically from expressing their own view by attending the conference. They prevented people physically from using the highway. I don't think that can be accepted. That can be acceptable. Under the new law, which I mentioned in the previous video, it may be that there would be a different result, but I'm by no means certain, because the law is unfortunately open to interpretation by the judges, and the way the new law is worded is not absolutely clear enough to prevent the same result occurring again. Time will tell. Bye for now.